Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. David Carver pulled into his driveway at 5:47 p.m., noting the precise time from habit. 12 years in the Army had trained him to observe details others missed. His beat-up Honda Civic coughed twice before dying, a sound that reminded him he needed to visit Beau's garage soon. The front door opened before he reached it. David, perfect timing. Jessica stood in the doorway, her smile too bright, too eager. She wore yoga pants and a loose tank top, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow looked calculated. I got everything ready for tomorrow. Ready for what? David set his teacher's bag down, scanning his wife's face. Something felt off. The camping trip. Remember? Lake Crescent? I've been planning it for weeks. David's brow furrowed. Jessica hated camping. Last summer, she complained about mosquitoes for 3 days after a single night outdoors. Since when do you plan camping trips? Since I realized we need family time. Jessica turned away, bustling toward the kitchen. Reese is so excited. She's been packing all afternoon. Dad! A small tornado of energy crashed into David's legs. Reese looked up at him with bright green eyes, her dark hair tangled from whatever adventure she'd been on. Mom says we're going to Lake Crescent. Can we look for beetles? And maybe catch fireflies? David lifted his daughter, studying her animated face. We can look for whatever you want, kiddo. He glanced at Jessica, who was arranging camping gear on the counter with military precision. Your mom's really got this organized. She made lists, Reese whispered conspiratorially. Like 5 different lists. And she bought new stuff. Look, she pointed to expensive camping equipment David didn't recognize. New sleeping bags. David examined the tags. $200 each. Jess, we already have sleeping bags. These are better, warmer, more comfortable. Jessica didn't look at him. I researched the best brands online. David watched his wife sort through supplies. In 12 years of marriage, Jessica had never researched camping gear. She preferred spa weekends and yoga retreats. This sudden interest in outdoor activities felt forced, like she was playing a role. What about work? David asked. Don't you have that wellness workshop this weekend? I canceled it. Jessica's hands stilled on a package of water purification tablets. Family comes first. The phrase sounded rehearsed. David's military training had taught him to trust his instincts when something felt wrong. Right now, every instinct screamed danger. Where exactly are we going? He moved closer to the counter, noting the gear selection. High-end water purification, professional-grade first aid kit, insect repellent he'd never seen before. Lake Crescent, near the Olympic Peninsula. Jessica pulled out a folded map, pointing to a red circle. This spot here. It's secluded, peaceful, perfect for family bonding. David studied the location. The area was remote, hours from any main road. How did you find this place? Online research. Jessica's phone buzzed on the counter. She lunged for it, checking the screen before quickly flipping it face down. Just confirming our reservation. Reservation? I thought you said it was secluded. It is, but you still need permits for some areas. Jessica's laugh sounded strained. You know how these government things work. David had worked with enough government agencies to know permit applications took weeks, not last-minute confirmations. He reached for Jessica's phone, but she snatched it away. Battery's dying, she said quickly. I need to charge it before we leave. Another lie. David had seen the battery indicator 87%. His wife was hiding something, and her deception was getting sloppy. Dad, can you help me pack my bug collection kit? Reese tugged on his shirt. I want to bring my magnifying glass and the specimen containers. Of course. David knelt beside his daughter. What are you hoping to find? Mom said there might be unusual insects up there. Special ones you can't find anywhere else. Reese's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Maybe we'll discover a new species. David glanced at Jessica, who was aggressively stuffing clothes into a duffel bag. Your mom knows about unusual insects? She's been reading about them online. She knows all sorts of stuff now. Reese bounced on her toes. She even bought special repellent that's supposed to work better than regular bug spray. What kind of special repellent? I don't know the name, but she said it uses different chemicals that bugs don't like. Reese shrugged. Can we leave really early? I want to get there before the insects are all hiding. We'll leave whenever your mom wants. David stood, his gaze finding Jessica again. She was checking her phone, typing rapidly with her back turned to them. The front door opened, and Bo Sterling stepped inside without knocking. David's best friend since basic training moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in any space. His grease-stained work shirt and calloused hands marked him as a man who fixed things for a living. Heard you folks are heading out to commune with nature, Bo said, his gravelly voice carrying skepticism. Since when does Jessica do the outdoor thing? Jessica spun around, her smile faltering for just a moment. Hi, Bo. Just trying something new. Uh-huh. Bo's dark eyes took in the expensive gear. This new something cost you a pretty penny. We can afford it. Jessica's tone turned defensive. David works hard. We deserve nice things. Never said you didn't. Bo picked up one of the insect repellent bottles, reading the label. This stuff's fancy. Never heard of this brand before. It's new, more effective than traditional repellents. Jessica moved to take the bottle, but Bo held on to it. What makes it more effective? Different chemical composition, more targeted approach to insect deterrence. Jessica's words sounded memorized, like she was reciting from a manual. Bo looked at David with raised eyebrows. They'd known each other long enough to communicate without words. Something was off about this whole situation. Well, Bo said slowly, make sure you folks stay safe out there. Remote areas can be unpredictable. We'll be fine. Jessica grabbed the repellent bottle from Bo's hands. David knows how to handle outdoor emergencies. Sure does. Bo's tone remained neutral, but David caught the warning in his friend's eyes. Just keep your guard up, brother. Never know what you might run into in the wilderness. After Bo left, David helped Reese pack her bug hunting supplies while Jessica finished organizing their gear. His daughter chattered excitedly about insects and camping adventures, but David's attention stayed on his wife. She moved with nervous energy, checking and rechecking items that were already perfectly organized. Dad, Reese looked up from her collection kit. Are you and Mom okay? What do you mean, kiddo? You seem weird around each other. Like you're mad, but pretending not to be. 10-year-olds saw more than adults gave them credit for. David knelt beside his daughter, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings, but we both love you very much. I know that. Reese hugged her magnifying glass. I just want us to have fun tomorrow, like a real family. The phrase real family hit David like a punch to the chest. Why they stopped being a real family? When had the distance between him and Jessica grown so wide that their daughter noticed? We'll have fun, David promised. I'll make sure of it. That evening, David watched Jessica pack with methodical precision. She folded clothes in perfect squares, arranged toiletries in labeled containers, and double-checked every item against multiple lists. The organization was impressive but cold, like she was preparing for a military operation rather than a family trip. You've really thought of everything, David said from the bedroom doorway. I want this to be perfect. Jessica didn't look up from her packing. We haven't done anything like this in so long, because you usually hate camping. Jessica's hands stilled. People change, David. I'm trying to be more adventurous. Since when? Since I realized how much I've been missing. Jessica zipped her bag with sharp, precise movements. I want to create memories with our daughter. Good memories. The emphasis on good memories felt ominous, like she was planning something David wouldn't remember fondly. He stepped into the room, studying his wife's profile in the lamplight. Weren't you telling me? Jessica finally looked at him, her blue eyes unreadable. Nothing. I'm trying to do something nice for our family. By taking us to a place you found through mysterious online research, using equipment you bought without discussing it, with special bug repellent you can't explain. You're being paranoid. I'm being observant. There's a difference. David sat on the bed. If something's wrong, you can tell me. We've been through worse things together. For a moment, Jessica's expression softened. She looked like the woman he'd married, vulnerable and real. Then the mask slipped back into place. Nothing's wrong. I just want tomorrow to be special. She turned away, busying herself with meaningless adjustments to already organized items. You should get some sleep. We're leaving early. David lay awake long after Jessica's breathing evened into sleep. His wife's behavior worried him more than any combat situation he'd faced. In war, enemies were obvious. At home, threats came disguised as people you trusted. He made a mental note to call Bo in the morning, just to let someone know where they were going. If something went wrong in that remote location, at least one person would know where to look. David's last thought before sleep was a question he couldn't answer. What was Jessica really planning? David woke to the smell of coffee and bacon at 5:30 a.m. Jessica was already dressed in new hiking boots and outdoor clothes that still had store tags. She moved through the kitchen with determined efficiency, packing a cooler with supplies for their day. "Morning," she said without looking up. "I made breakfast sandwiches for the road." Reese bounded into the kitchen wearing her favorite nature t-shirt and carrying her bug collection kit. "Is it time to go? Can we leave now?" "After we eat and load the car." David poured coffee from a thermos Jessica had prepared. The coffee was perfect, exactly how he liked it. Another small detail that felt calculated rather than caring. They loaded 2 cars with their gear. David assumed they'd all ride together, but Jessica insisted on taking separate vehicles. "I need to stop at the yoga studio after we get back," she explained. "No sense making you and Reese wait around." "What's at the yoga studio that can't wait until Monday?" "Just some equipment I need to pick up for my online classes." Jessica avoided his eyes, focusing on adjusting her rearview mirror. "I'll follow you to the campsite." David didn't like splitting up, but arguing would upset Reese. His daughter was practically vibrating with excitement, her face pressed against the window as they drove through increasingly remote countryside. "Look at all the trees." Reese pointed at dense forest lining the mountain road. "I bet there's so many insects in there. Different kinds than we have at home." "Probably." David checked his mirrors regularly, making sure Jessica's car stayed behind them. The road wound through areas with no cell phone coverage, past warning signs about logging trucks and wildlife crossings. "Dad, why does Mom seem nervous?" David glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "What makes you think she's nervous?" "She keeps checking her phone, and she packed way too much stuff. And she made those weird faces when she thought we weren't looking." Reese pulled her knees up to her chest, like she's scared of something. "Your mom just wants everything to go perfectly. Sometimes when people want something to be really good, they worry too much about it. Is that why you seem worried too?" David's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His daughter was too perceptive for her own good. "I'm not worried. Just being careful on these mountain roads." They reached the turnoff Jessica had marked on her map. A narrow dirt road disappeared into thick forest, marked only by a small sign warning about private property and restricted access. David stopped the car and got out to examine the sign more closely. "Authorized personnel only," he read aloud. "Jess, this looks like a restricted area." Jessica parked behind him and approached with her map. "The campsite is just past this section. It's legal camping area beyond the restricted zone." "How do you know that?" "I researched it thoroughly online. There are forums where people share camping locations." Jessica pointed down the dirt road. "The restricted area is only for the first mile or so. Then it opens up to public land." David studied the map Jessica had brought. The markings looked professional, like government survey work, but something about the area designation seemed off. What was this place restricted for? Old logging operations, I think. Maybe some environmental cleanup. Jessica was already walking back to her car. "The camping area is perfectly safe." They drove deeper into the forest on a road that barely qualified as more than trail. David's Civic scraped against rocks and roots, while Jessica's newer SUV handled the terrain more easily. The trees grew thicker, blocking most of the afternoon sunlight and creating an atmosphere of perpetual twilight. "This is like a fairy tale forest," Reese whispered, pressing her face against the window. "So mysterious and beautiful." After 20 minutes of rough driving, they emerged into a clearing beside a small lake. The water was mirror still, reflecting the surrounding mountains and dense forest. It was beautiful in an isolated, untouched way that made David understand why Jessica had chosen this spot. "Wow," Reese breathed, jumping out of the car the moment David parked. "This is amazing." Look at all the places bugs could hide. David surveyed the campsite, while Jessica began unloading her SUV. The clearing was larger than he'd expected, with obvious signs that others had camped here before fire rings, cleared tent spots, even a basic latrine setup behind some trees. But something felt wrong about the space. It was too perfect, too convenient, like it had been prepared specifically for their visit. This is a pretty developed campsite for such a remote location, David observed. Some places are just naturally good for camping. Jessica pulled tent stakes from her gear. That's why people keep coming back to them. Where exactly do you want to set up? David examined the clearing. Multiple tent spots were available, some close together, others more isolated. I thought we could spread out a bit. Give everyone some space. Jessica pointed to a spot about 50 yards from where David was standing. I'll set up over there. You and Reese can take the area by the lake. Why so far apart? David didn't like the idea of separation, especially in such an isolated location. Privacy. Independence. Reese is old enough to understand that married couples sometimes need their own space. Jessica's tone was matter of fact, but David caught an undercurrent of something else: relief, maybe, or anticipation. They spent the next hour setting up camp. David and Reese erected their tent near the water's edge, while Jessica established her own camp in a spot that was partially hidden by trees and large rocks. The distance between their campsites felt intentional, like Jessica was creating physical barriers between herself and her family. Can we explore before it gets dark? Reese asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. I want to see what kinds of insects live here. Sure, kiddo. Let's take a look around. They spent an hour exploring the area around the lake. Reese collected specimens in her containers, exclaiming over beetles and moths David had never seen before. Some of the insects were unusual colors and patterns that didn't match anything from his limited knowledge of local wildlife. Dad, look at this one. Reese held up a container with a small, iridescent beetle. Have you ever seen anything like it? David examined the beetle through the magnifying glass. Its shell had an almost metallic quality, and its legs were longer and more delicate than typical beetles. No, I haven't. That's really unusual. There are lots of insects here I don't recognize. Maybe this area has special conditions that create different species. Reese carefully labeled her specimen container, like an isolated ecosystem. Maybe. David scanned the forest around them. The idea of an isolated ecosystem was interesting, but it raised questions about why this particular area would be restricted by authorities. As evening approached, they built a fire and prepared dinner. Jessica joined them, but remained distant, checking her phone frequently and contributing little to conversation. She picked at her food, seeming more focused on time passing than on family interaction. Tell us about the insects you found, Reese, David encouraged, hoping to draw Jessica into their daughter's enthusiasm. Reese launched into detailed descriptions of her specimens, using scientific terminology she'd learned from nature documentaries and library books. She was particularly excited about several species she couldn't identify. The diversity here is incredible, Reese concluded. It's like this area has been isolated long enough for unique species to develop. That's very observant, Jessica said, speaking for the first time in 20 minutes. You're becoming quite the little scientist. Dad taught me how to observe things carefully. He says details matter. Reese looked at her father with adoration. Right, Dad, right. Details can keep you safe. David met Jessica's eyes across the fire. They help you understand what's really happening in any situation. Jessica looked away first, focusing on her phone again. I'm tired. I think I'll turn in early. Already? We just got here. David added another log to the fire. I thought we were going to spend time together. We did spend time together. We had dinner, we talked. Jessica stood and brushed dirt from her pants. Tomorrow we can do more activities. Tonight, I need rest. She walked back to her isolated campsite without saying good night to Reese. David watched his wife's retreating figure, noting how she moved with purpose rather than tiredness. She wasn't going to sleep, she was going to do something else. Is Mom mad at us? Reese asked quietly. No, kiddo. Your mom is just thinking about things right now. Adult things that don't have anything to do with you. David pulled his daughter closer to the fire's warmth. Want to learn about constellations? They spent another hour by the fire, David pointing out stars and telling stories about navigation techniques he'd learned in the military. Reese listened with rapt attention, asking intelligent questions about astronomy and wilderness survival. Dad, Reese yawned as the fire burned low. Can we camp like this more often? Just you and me. The question hit David harder than he expected. Would you like that? Yeah, I like when it's just us. You pay attention to what I'm saying. You answer my questions. Reese leaned against his shoulder. Mom's been weird lately. Like she's thinking about something else all the time. How long has she been weird? Maybe 6 months? She started doing more yoga retreats and online stuff. And she's always on her phone now. Reese picked up a stick and poked at the dying embers. Do you think she still loves us? The innocent question nearly broke David's heart. Of course she loves us. Sometimes adults get distracted by work and responsibilities. It doesn't mean they stop loving their families. Okay, Reese didn't sound entirely convinced. Can we stay up a little longer? I like talking to you. They remained by the fire until Reese fell asleep against David's shoulder. He carried his daughter to their tent, tucking her in her sleeping bag before stepping outside to make sure the fire was properly extinguished. From across the clearing, he could see a faint glow from Jessica's campsite. She was awake, probably on her phone. David considered walking over to check on her, but something held him back. His instincts warned him that Jessica was waiting for something or someone. Instead, he positioned himself where he could observe her campsite from their tent. If Jessica was planning something, he wanted to be ready. David lay awake listening to forest sounds and his daughter's peaceful breathing. Somewhere in the darkness, his wife was doing something she didn't want him to know about. Tomorrow, he would find out what. David woke to Reese's panicked voice. Dad, something's wrong. He bolted upright in his sleeping bag, immediately alert. Reese sat beside him, her arms and legs covered in angry red welts. The bites were unlike anything David had seen before, large, swollen, and already beginning to blister around the edges. Jesus, what happened? David examined his daughter's arms. The bites formed strange patterns, clustered in areas that should have been protected by her pajamas. When did these appear? I woke up itching. They hurt, Dad. They really hurt. Reese's voice trembled with pain and fear. What bit me? David rolled up his own sleeves and discovered similar welts covering his arms and neck. The bites burned with an intensity that made his skin feel like it was on fire. Unlike normal insect bites, these seemed to be getting worse rather than better, the swelling increasing even as he watched. Dad, your face, Reese whispered. David touched his cheek and felt raised bumps along his jawline. The bites covered every area of exposed skin, dozens of them, all exhibiting the same angry inflammation and unusual size. We need to get you looked at, David said, fighting to keep his voice calm. These don't look like normal bug bites. He unzipped the tent and stepped outside, expecting to find Jessica dealing with similar symptoms. Instead, his wife sat by her campfire, fully dressed and apparently unaffected. Her skin was clear, unmarked by any bites. Jessica, David called across the clearing. We've got a problem. Jessica looked up from her phone, her expression shifting from surprise to concern as she saw David's condition. What happened? Bug bites. Lots of them. Reese is covered. David walked toward his wife, noting her pristine appearance. How are you not affected? I used the special repellent I brought. You must have forgotten to apply yours last night. Jessica stood, pulling a bottle from her gear. Here, put this on now. It should help. David examined the repellent bottle. The label was unlike anything he'd seen in stores, professional looking, but without familiar brand markings. What kind of insects cause bites like this? Probably just really aggressive mosquitoes. This area has different species than what we're used to at home. Jessica's explanation sounded rehearsed. The repellent will prevent more bites. We shared the same space all evening. We should have gotten the same exposure. David studied his wife's face. Why are you completely unaffected? I applied repellent before bed. You and Reese didn't. Jessica moved toward their tent. Let me see how bad Reese's bites are. Dad. Reese emerged from the tent, her condition visibly worsening. The welts had grown larger, and her face showed signs of systemic reaction, flushed cheeks, and glassy eyes that suggested fever. "Oh my God," Jessica breathed, but her shock seemed performed rather than genuine. "Those look terrible. We need to get her to a doctor immediately." David began breaking down their campsite with military efficiency. "These aren't normal insect bites. Don't panic. I'm sure they'll fade once we get home and treat them properly." Jessica moved to help pack, but her movements were slow, almost reluctant. "Maybe we should stay and see if the symptoms improve. Look at her, Jess. She's having a reaction." David pointed to Reese, who was sitting on a log looking pale and nauseated. "We're leaving now." "Of course. You're right." Jessica began packing her own gear, but David noticed she was taking her time, checking items multiple times and organizing things that didn't need organization. "I can drive myself," Jessica said as they loaded the cars. "I have that yoga class this afternoon, remember? What yoga class is more important than making sure our daughter gets medical attention? It's not more important, but there's no reason we all need to go to the same place." Jessica avoided looking directly at Reese's worsening condition. "I can meet you at home later." David's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Jessica wasn't concerned about their daughter's welfare. If anything, she seemed eager to separate from them as quickly as possible. "Fine. Drive separately." David helped Reese into his car, noting how his daughter moved slowly, like her joints were stiff and painful. "But I'm taking her straight to Dr. Harlow." "Good idea. He'll know what to do." Jessica got into her SUV without offering comfort to Reese or expressing further concern about their condition. As they drove away from the campsite, David watched Jessica's vehicle in his rearview mirror. Instead of following them back toward town, she turned onto a different road that led deeper into the forest. When David tried to call her phone, it went straight to voicemail. "Dad, I feel really sick," Reese said from the passenger seat. "The bites are getting worse." David looked at his daughter and saw that she was right. The welts had grown larger and more inflamed during the short drive. Some were beginning to develop dark centers that looked infected or necrotic. "We'll be at Dr. Harlow's office soon," David promised, pressing harder on the accelerator. "He'll fix you right up." But as they drove toward town, David couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica knew exactly what had caused these bites, and that she'd planned for this outcome from the beginning to Dr. Pierce Harlow's office occupied the ground floor of a converted Victorian house in downtown Clearwater. David had been bringing Reese here since she was born, trusting the older physician's careful approach and genuine concern for his patients. Today, that trust felt more crucial than ever. "Good morning, David. What brings you?" Dr. Harlow stopped mid-sentence when he saw Reese's condition. "Dear God, bring her straight back." Within minutes, Reese was on an examination table while Dr. Harlow studied her bites through a magnifying glass. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he documented the unusual characteristics of each welt. "How long since the onset?" Dr. Harlow asked, photographing several of the larger bites with a specialized camera. "We discovered them about 3 hours ago. They've gotten worse during the drive here." David showed the doctor his own affected areas. "We were camping near Lake Crescent. Remote area. Have you seen anything like this before?" Dr. Harlow continued his examination, paying particular attention to the pattern and clustering of bites. "The presentation is highly unusual." "Never. Jessica wasn't affected at all, which doesn't make sense if we were in the same environment." David watched as the doctor took measurements and made detailed notes. "She said they were just aggressive mosquitoes." Dr. Harlow paused in his examination. "These are mosquito bites, David. The size, the venom reaction, the tissue response, this is something entirely different." "Different how?" "I need to run some tests before I can give you definitive answers. But I can tell you with certainty that these bites are from an insect species I've never encountered in this region." Dr. Harlow prepared several vials for blood samples. "The venom is causing a systemic inflammatory response that's quite concerning." Reese lay quietly during the examination, her breathing shallow and her skin flushed with fever. The sight of his daughter's deteriorating condition filled David with a cold rage that reminded him of combat situations where civilians were threatened. "What kind of treatment are we looking at?" That depends on what we're dealing with. I'm going to start Reese on broad-spectrum antihistamines and anti-inflammatory medication, but we need to identify the specific toxin to provide targeted treatment. Dr. Harlow finished collecting samples. I'm also going to contact some colleagues who specialize in exotic insect bites. Exotic? What makes you think they're exotic? Dr. Harlow hesitated, choosing his words carefully. The bite pattern suggests an insect that doesn't naturally occur in the Pacific Northwest. The venom chemistry appears to be unlike anything documented in local species. Are you saying someone introduced non-native insects to that area? I'm saying we need more information before drawing conclusions. Dr. Harlow's tone became more serious. David, I want you to contact the authorities about this incident. If there are dangerous insects in that camping area, other people could be at risk. What kind of authorities? Start with the county health department. They'll know who else needs to be involved. Dr. Harlow prepared medication for Reese. And I want to see both of you back here tomorrow. If the symptoms worsen before then, bring her to the emergency room immediately. David helped Reese to the waiting room while Dr. Harlow prepared his treatment recommendations. His daughter moved slowly, clearly in pain, but she was alert and responsive. The immediate crisis seemed manageable, but David's military experience told him this was just the beginning of a larger problem. Mr. Carver, Dr. Harlow appeared in the waiting room doorway. Could I speak with you privately for a moment? David followed the doctor into his office, where Dr. Harlow closed the door and gestured for him to sit down. David, I need to be completely honest with you about what we're dealing with. Dr. Harlow's expression was grave. I've been practicing medicine for 37 years, and I've never seen anything like those bites. What are you saying? I'm saying the insect that bit you and Reese isn't native to this continent. Hell, it might not be native to any natural ecosystem. Dr. Harlow pulled up images on his computer. Look at these bite patterns. See how they're arranged in precise clusters? That's not random feeding behavior, it's systematic, almost experimental. David studied the photographs, noting the geometric precision of the bite arrangements. Experimental how? Like someone was testing dosage amounts or venom delivery systems. Dr. Harlow switched to microscopic images of tissue samples. The venom contains compounds I can't identify with standard testing. This isn't just an exotic species, it's something that's been modified. Modified by who? That's what you need to find out. Because if someone is breeding or engineering insects like this, your family stumbled into something much more dangerous than a camping trip gone wrong. Dr. Harlow leaned forward. David, I think you and Reese were deliberately exposed to these insects. The words hit David like a physical blow. His suspicions about Jessica's behavior suddenly made terrifying sense. Are you sure? The location, the selective targeting, the unusual species, too many coincidences. Dr. Harlow's voice was steady but urgent. Someone wanted you and your daughter to be bitten by those insects. The question is why? David's mind raced through the implications. If Dr. Harlow was right, then Jessica had knowingly endangered their daughter's life. The woman he trusted for 12 years had used their family camping trip as cover for something unspeakable. What do I do? Document everything. Contact authorities. And figure out who wanted this to happen to your family. Dr. Harlow stood. I'll continue analyzing the samples and reaching out to colleagues who might recognize these venom compounds. But David, be very careful who you trust. If someone orchestrated this attack, they might not be finished. David left the doctor's office with medication for Reese and a growing certainty that his marriage was built on lies. As he helped his daughter into the car, one thought dominated his mind. Jessica knew exactly what those insects were, and she'd deliberately exposed them to danger. The question was whether she'd acted alone or if she was working with someone else. Either way, David was going to find out the truth. David drove straight to Beau's garage after leaving Dr. Harlow's office. His best friend would listen without judgment and help him think through the situation logically. Reese had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, her breathing steady but labored, the medication providing temporary relief from her symptoms. Sterling's Auto Repair occupied a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Clearwater, surrounded by salvage cars and parts that both somehow transformed into reliable vehicles. David found his friend under the hood of a pickup truck, grease-stained hands working with practiced efficiency. Back early from your nature adventure, Bo observed without looking up. How'd it go? It went to hell. David helped Reese out of the car, showing Bo her condition. Look at this. Bo straightened immediately, his casual demeanor shifting to concern. Jesus Christ. What happened to her? Bug bites, but not normal ones. David explained Dr. Harlow's assessment, while Bo examined Reese's welts with the careful attention he usually reserved for engine diagnostics. These don't look like any bug bites I've ever seen, Bo concluded, and I've spent plenty of time in the woods. That's what the doctor said. He thinks they're from insects that aren't native to this area. David helped Reese settle on a bench in Bo's office. Maybe insects that have been modified somehow. Modified how? He wasn't sure, but he thinks Reese and I were deliberately exposed. David met his friend's eyes. Bo, I think Jessica set us up. Bo was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. That's a serious accusation, brother. I know, but think about it. She insisted on this camping trip to a location she'd never been to. She bought all new gear, including special bug repellent. She set up her tent far away from ours, and she wasn't affected by whatever bit us. David's voice grew harder as he connected the pieces. She knew what was going to happen. Why would she do something like that? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. David pulled out his phone. She said she was in a yoga class, but she drove deeper into the forest when we left the campsite. Bo leaned against his workbench, thinking, you remember those rumors about the research facility that got shut down a few years back? The one out past Devil's Creek? What kind of research facility? Nobody knew for sure. Government contracts, private funding, real secretive stuff. Then one day it was just gone. Cleaned out, fenced off, no more traffic. Bo gestured toward the mountains. That was in the same general area where you folks went camping. David felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. What kind of research were they supposedly doing? Biotech stuff, agricultural applications, pest control, maybe some military contracts. Bo's expression darkened. Word was they were working with insects, trying to modify them for various purposes. How do you know all this? You hear things when you work on vehicles for half the county. People talk when they think you're not listening. Bo moved to his computer, an old desktop machine he used for parts ordering. Let me see what I can find online about that facility. While Bo searched, David tried calling Jessica's phone again. It went straight to voicemail, just like every other attempt since they'd left the campsite. His wife was deliberately avoiding contact, which strengthened his growing suspicions. Here we go, Bo said, pointing to his screen. Biodyne Research Facility. Closed down 3 years ago after some kind of safety violation. Says here, they were working on innovative pest control solutions for agricultural and defense applications. Defense applications? Military contracts. Probably developing ways to use insects as weapons or surveillance tools. Bo scrolled through more information. Look at this, the facility was shut down after reports of unauthorized human testing. David's blood ran cold. Human testing of what? Doesn't say specifically, but if they were modifying insects for military purposes, they need to test the effects on human subjects. Bo looked at Reese, who was dozing fitfully on the bench. David, I think your daughter just became part of someone's experiment. I need to get into Jessica's computer, see what she's been researching online. David's mind was shifting into tactical mode, treating the situation like a military operation. She mentioned finding information on camping forums, but I bet there's more. You know her passwords? We've always shared computer access. Never had secrets before. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on David. Can you stay with Reese while I go home? I don't want her around if Jessica comes back. Of course. But David, be careful. If your wife is mixed up with people who are doing illegal research, they might not hesitate to hurt you to protect themselves. David drove home with his jaw clenched and his hands tight on the steering wheel. 12 years of marriage, and he'd never suspected his wife was capable of endangering their child. The betrayal felt deeper than any wound he'd sustained in combat. The house was empty when he arrived, Jessica's car absent from the driveway. David went straight to their shared home office, where Jessica kept her laptop and managed her yoga business. He'd always respected her privacy before, but that consideration had ended the moment she'd put Reese in danger. Jessica's laptop was password protected, but David knew her patterns. She used variations of their wedding date, their daughter's name, and their old addresses. On the fourth try their anniversary, plus Reese's birth year, the computer unlocked. David immediately checked Jessica's browser history and found exactly what he'd expected. Extensive research about the Biodyne facility, detailed maps of the restricted area, and forums dedicated to urban exploration of abandoned government sites. But there was more. Jessica had been researching genetic modification of insects, specifically focusing on species that could deliver targeted toxins through bite injection. She'd bookmarked scientific papers about venom synthesis, articles about illegal bioweapons testing, and news reports about Biodyne's shutdown. Most damning of all, David found Jessica's email correspondence with someone named Silas Deegan. The emails went back 6 months, starting with innocent-seeming messages about wellness retreats and new opportunities for financial independence. But as David read through the conversation chain, the true nature of their relationship became clear. Silas was offering Jessica money, significant amounts, to participate in field testing of new insect repellent formulations. The payments were structured to look like legitimate business transactions, complete with fake invoices for consulting services. The most recent emails made David's stomach turn. Silas had provided Jessica with detailed instructions for the camping trip, including exact coordinates, specific timing, and guidance on how to ensure proper exposure conditions for the test subjects. Test subjects. David's wife had been paid to deliver him and their daughter to someone who wanted to experiment on them with modified insects. The final email in the chain, sent the night before their camping trip, contained a single line. Payment will be transferred upon confirmation of successful exposure. Remember, timing is critical for accurate data collection. David printed every email, every research page, every piece of evidence he could find. Then he copied everything to a flash drive before Jessica could return and delete the files. His wife had sold her family to a stranger for money, turning their daughter into a lab rat for some sick experiment. But who was Silas Deegan, and what was he really after? David's phone rang as he finished copying files. Bo's name appeared on the screen. "You need to get back here now," Bo said urgently. "Reese is getting worse, and there's a guy here asking questions about your camping trip." David raced back to Bo's garage with printed emails and the flash drive burning in his pocket like evidence of the worst betrayal imaginable. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Jessica, but he ignored them. Whatever lies she wanted to tell could wait until after he made sure Reese was safe. He found Bo standing protectively near the office door, arms crossed and expression hostile. A man in an expensive suit stood near David's parked car, examining it with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to gathering information. David Carver. The man approached with a confident smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Agent Ross with the Department of Health Services. I understand you had an incident involving unusual insect bites. Who told you that?" David positioned himself between the stranger and the garage office where Reese was resting. "Dr. Harlow contacted our office as required by law when exotic species pose potential public health risks." Agent Ross pulled out a leather folder containing official-looking identification. "I need to ask you some questions about your camping location and the circumstances of exposure." David examined the ID closely. The credentials looked legitimate, but something felt wrong about the man's presence. Government agents didn't usually respond to single incident reports within hours, especially not on weekends. "What kind of questions?" "Standard protocol. Location details, timeline of events, symptoms observed." Agent Ross pulled out a digital recorder. "With your permission, I'd like to document your statement for our investigation." "Investigation into what?" "Potential bioterrorism threats. Modified insects could represent a significant danger to public safety if they're being deployed intentionally." Agent Ross glanced toward the garage office. "I'd also like to examine your daughter's condition, if possible. She's sleeping." The doctor gave her medication. David's protective instincts flared. This man wasn't getting near Reese until David understood what was really happening. "Of course. I wouldn't want to disturb her rest." Agent Ross's smile became more strained. Perhaps you could provide the basic information about your camping location. We need to secure the area if dangerous insects are present. David made a decision. If this man was legitimate, he'd want to know about Jessica's involvement. If he wasn't legitimate, David's response would reveal that fact quickly. Before I answer your questions, I have some information you might find interesting. David pulled out the printed emails. My wife seems to have been in contact with someone about this camping trip. Someone who knew what kind of insects we'd encounter. Agent Ross's expression sharpened as he read the emails. Silas Deegan, how long has your wife been in contact with this individual? 6 months, according to these emails. David watched the man's reaction carefully. You recognize the name? Mr. Deegan is a person of interest in several ongoing investigations. Agent Ross folded the emails carefully. Mr. Carver, I need you to understand that your family may have stumbled into something much larger than a simple camping accident. What kind of investigations? Illegal bioweapons research, human trafficking for experimental purposes, and distribution of banned biological agents. Agent Ross's official demeanor dropped slightly. Your wife appears to have been recruited as an asset in a human testing operation. The words hit David like bullets. Are you saying Jessica was paid to get us infected with those things? That's exactly what I'm saying. And if Mr. Deegan follows his usual pattern, he's not finished with your family yet. Agent Ross looked around the garage nervously. We need to get you and your daughter into protective custody immediately. Why should I trust you? David's combat instincts were screaming warnings. How do I know you're not working with Deegan? Because if I was working with him, your daughter would already be dead. Agent Ross's voice became deadly serious. The insects that bit you weren't just modified for research purposes, Mr. Carver. They were designed to deliver a progressive toxin that becomes more dangerous over time. What are you talking about? The initial bites are just the delivery system. The real weapon is an engineered pathogen that activates 12 to 24 hours after exposure. Agent Ross checked his watch. How long ago were you bitten? David calculated quickly. About 8 hours. Then we have maybe 16 hours before the secondary effects begin. And those effects are typically fatal without specialized treatment. Agent Ross moved toward his own vehicle. I can get your daughter the antidote, but we need to move now. What antidote? The same facility that created those insects also developed countermeasures. Deegan stole both the weapons and the cures when Biodyne was shut down. Agent Ross opened his car door. He's been selling both sides of the equation to the highest bidders. David's mind raced. If this man was telling the truth, Reese was going to die without treatment. If he was lying, following him could lead David and his daughter directly into a trap. I want to call Dr. Harlow first. Confirm what you're telling me about the timeline and symptoms. By all means. But while you're making calls, your daughter's condition is getting worse. Agent Ross started his engine. I'll be at the county airport. Hangar 7. If you want to save her life, be there within the hour. Agent Ross drove away, leaving David standing in the garage parking lot with more questions than answers. Bo emerged from the office, having listened to the entire conversation. That felt wrong, brother. Everything about that guy screamed fake to me. Yeah, but what if he's right about the timeline? David called Dr. Harlow's office, getting the answering service. The after-hours number goes to his cell phone. Dr. Harlow answered on the second ring. David, how is Reese doing? That's what I'm calling about. A man claiming to be a government agent just told me the insects that bit us were designed to deliver a delayed action toxin. He says Reese will die without specialized treatment. David explained the encounter while Bo listened intently. David, I haven't contacted any government agencies yet. I was planning to make those calls Monday morning. Dr. Harlow's voice carried alarm. And I've never heard of any Agent Ross with the Department of Health Services. So he was lying about being sent by me, absolutely. But that doesn't mean he's lying about the insects. Dr. Harlow paused. I've been researching similar cases online, and I found reports of engineered bioweapons that work exactly as he described. Initial bite followed by delayed toxin activation. How long do we have? If those reports are accurate, the secondary effects typically begin between 12 and 36 hours after exposure. But David, the antidote he mentioned that could be real. Some of these weapons were developed with corresponding treatments. So I don't know whether to trust him or run from him. I think you need a third option. Bring Reese here to the hospital. We can monitor her condition and be ready to treat whatever symptoms develop. Dr. Harlow's voice became urgent, and David called the real authorities. If someone is using biological weapons against civilians, law enforcement needs to be involved immediately. David ended the call and looked at Bo. I need to get Reese to the hospital, and I need to figure out who I can trust in this mess. What about Jessica? Any word from her? Several missed calls, but I'm not ready to talk to her yet. David checked on Reese, who was awake but pale and obviously uncomfortable. I don't know if she's a victim or a conspirator at this point. Either way, she's got information we need. Bo helped David carry Reese to his car. Maybe it's time to stop avoiding her calls and start demanding some answers. As David drove toward the hospital, his phone rang again. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, and this time David answered. "Where are you?" Jessica's voice was strained, almost panicked. "Taking our daughter to get medical treatment for the bites you arranged for her to receive." David's tone was ice cold. "I found your emails, Jess. I know about Silas Deegan and the money he paid you." The silence stretched so long David thought the call had dropped. When Jessica finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "David, you don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Then explain it to me. Explain how you sold your daughter to a bioweapons dealer for experimental testing. He said they were just testing new repellent formulations. He said no one would be hurt." Jessica's words came out in a rush. "I thought it was legitimate research. I thought the money would help us get ahead financially. You thought putting experimental insects near our 10-year-old daughter was legitimate. I didn't know they were dangerous. Silas said they were modified to be less harmful than normal insects. He said the testing was just to measure the effectiveness of different repellent chemicals." Jessica was crying now. "David, I swear I didn't know they could hurt anyone. Where are you now?" "At home, waiting for you to come back so we can figure this out together." Jessica's voice became pleading. "Please, David, I made a terrible mistake, but I never meant for anyone to get hurt." David wanted to believe his wife was simply naive rather than malicious, but the evidence suggested otherwise. The emails he'd read showed Jessica asking detailed questions about symptoms and timeline questions that indicated she knew the insects were designed to cause harm. "Jessica, a man claiming to be a government agent, just told me those insects were carrying a delayed action toxin. He says Reese will die without antidote treatment." David watched his daughter in the rearview mirror, noting her increasingly labored breathing. "Is that true?" "I don't know. Silas never mentioned anything about delayed effects or antidotes." Jessica's panic was audible. "David, what can I do? How can I help fix this? You can tell me everything you know about Silas Deegan, where he lives, how to contact him, what other experiments he's running." David's voice hardened. "And you can pray that our daughter survives what you've done to her." David ended the call and focused on getting to the hospital as quickly as possible. Whether Jessica was a naive victim or a willing conspirator could be determined later. Right now, his only priority was saving Reese's life. But as he drove through the night, David knew his marriage was over. Even if Jessica had been deceived rather than deliberately malicious, she'd made choices that endangered their daughter's life. Trust, once broken so completely, could never be rebuilt. The question now was whether David could find Silas Deegan and get the antidote before it was too late to save Reese. David arrived at Clearwater Regional Hospital to find Dr. Harlow waiting in the emergency department. His daughter's condition had worsened during the drive. Her breathing was more labored, her fever higher, and the bite marks had developed dark centers that looked increasingly necrotic. "Get her straight into room 3, Dr. Harlow instructed the nursing staff. "I want blood work for access and full vital monitoring immediately." While medical personnel worked on Reese, David paced the hallway and tried to make sense of the evening's revelations. His phone buzzed with a text message from Jessica. "Coming to hospital. Need to talk." David replied immediately, "Stay away. You've done enough damage." But Jessica's response made him pause. "Silas is threatening me. Says if I don't deliver more test subjects, he'll release information that will destroy our family." "David, I think he's been planning this for months. Before David could process the implications, another text arrived from an unknown number. Mr. Carver, this is Silas. I believe we need to discuss your daughter's condition. Meet me at the Cascade Diner in 1 hour if you want her to survive. Dr. Harlow. David showed the physician both messages. What do I do? You don't go anywhere alone. That's obviously a trap. Dr. Harlow checked Reese's latest blood results on his tablet. But David, these lab values are concerning. Her white cell count is dropping rapidly, and we're seeing signs of systemic toxin exposure. How long does she have? If this follows the pattern I've been researching online, we have maybe 6 to 8 hours before organ failure begins. Dr. Harlow's expression was grim. We need that antidote. David's phone rang. Bo's name appeared on the screen. Brother, you need to know something, Bo said without preamble. I did some digging on your wife's computer activities while you were gone. Found some files she tried to delete. What kind of files? Bank records showing payments from someone named Deegan going back 8 months, not 6. And communications with other people. Looks like Jessica wasn't the only one recruited for this operation. Bo's voice was tight with anger. David, your wife has been part of a human trafficking ring that delivers families to be used in illegal medical experiments. The words hit David like a physical blow. Are you sure? I'm looking at emails between Jessica and 3 other women. They're all getting paid to set up camping trips, family outings, even kids' birthday parties where children are exposed to modified insects. Bo paused. David, Reese isn't their first victim. There have been at least a dozen other kids. David's vision went red with rage. His wife hadn't just endangered their daughter, she'd been systematically betraying families for months, delivering children to be used as test subjects for biological weapons. Where are those other children now? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Some of the emails mentioned subjects requiring extended observation and transfers to facility care when family intervention becomes problematic. Bo's voice became urgent. David, I think they've been kidnapping kids whose families ask too many questions. Send me everything you found. I'm forwarding it to someone who might be able to help. David ended the call and immediately contacted Ryan McClure, his former Army tech specialist who now worked private security. Raya answered on the first ring. David Carver, haven't heard from you in 2 years. What's the emergency? David explained the situation quickly, sending Raya the evidence Bo had uncovered along with the emails he'd found on Jessica's computer. His old Army colleague was one of the few people he trusted completely, and her expertise in digital forensics might uncover connections he'd missed. Jesus Christ, David. This is bigger than just your family, Raya said after reviewing the files. I'm seeing connections to at least 3 other similar operations in different states. Someone's running a nationwide network using recruited spouses to deliver test subjects. Can you identify the people running it? Give me 20 minutes. I'll trace these financial transactions and communication patterns. Raya's typing was audible over the phone. But David, you need to know that most of these operations in the same way. When families become problematic, they don't just disappear the children. They eliminate entire families to protect the operation. Are you telling me we're all targets now? I'm telling you that once they realize you've uncovered their operation, they'll want to clean up loose ends. Raya paused her typing. How secure is your current location? I'm at the hospital with Reese. Jessica is somewhere else, and Bo is at his garage. Get everyone together in one secure location. And David assumed that Jessica is still working with them. She may have been recruited through blackmail or coercion, but she's been too involved in this operation to trust completely. David's phone buzzed with another text from Silas. Your time is running out, Mr. Carver. 30 minutes to make a decision about your daughter's treatment. Raya, they're trying to force a meeting, claiming they have antidote for Reese. That's probably true. These bioweapons operations always develop countermeasures partly for their own protection, partly to maximize profits by selling both sides. Raya's typing resumed. But David, if you meet with them, you won't be coming back. They're past the point of trying to cover this up quietly. Dr. Harlow appeared in the hallway, his expression grave. David, Reese's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Her organ function is declining faster than my research suggested it would. What does that mean? It means either the toxin is more concentrated than typical, or she received multiple exposures. Dr. Harlow pulled David aside. David, I need to ask you something difficult. Is there any possibility that your wife administered additional toxin after the initial bite exposure? The question hit David like a sledgehammer. What are you suggesting? Some of these engineered biotoxins require booster doses to achieve lethal concentrations. If someone wanted to ensure a fatal outcome, they might administer additional toxin through other means. Dr. Harlow showed David Reese's latest lab results. Her toxin levels are far higher than they should be from insect bites alone. David's phone buzzed with a message from Jessica at hospital parking lot. Please let me explain what really happened. Against his better judgment, David went to meet his wife. He found Jessica sitting in her SUV, looking haggard and frightened. When she saw him approaching, she got out of the car with her hands visible, a gesture that surprised David with its implications. I know you don't trust me, Jessica said immediately. I know I've destroyed everything between us. But David, I have information that might save Reese. What information? Silas lied to me about everything. The insects, the timeline, the danger level. Jessica pulled out her phone, showing David a text conversation. He's been threatening me for weeks, saying if I don't continue recruiting families, he'll kill all of us. David read the messages, noting their threatening tone and specific references to consequences for noncompliance. This doesn't explain why Reese's toxin levels are so high, David said coldly. That Jessica's face crumpled. Because I gave her additional doses. Silas said if the initial exposure wasn't sufficient, I needed to make sure she received enough toxin to provide useful data. You poisoned our daughter. Multiple times. I put liquid drops in her water bottle during the camping trip. Silas said it was just to ensure accurate test results. Jessica was crying openly now. David, I thought I was part of legitimate research. I thought the money would help us build a better life for Reese. You nearly killed her for money. I know what I've done. Jessica wiped her eyes. But David, Silas has the antidote. He's willing to trade it for something specific. What does he want? He wants you. Jessica met David's eyes. He says your military medical training makes you valuable for his operation. He wants to recruit you as a field medic for his human testing programs. David understood immediately. Silas wasn't just running experiments. He was building an organization that could conduct field testing anywhere, with medical support to keep subjects alive long enough to provide useful data. And if I refuse, Reese dies, and he moves on to his next targets. Jessica showed David another message from Silas. He's got 3 more families lined up for testing this week. David's phone rang. Raya's name appeared on the screen. David, I've got bad news and worse news, Raya said immediately. The bad news is that Silas Deegan is a former pharmaceutical executive who's been building a network of human testing operations for the past 3 years. The worst news is that the FBI has been tracking him, and they think he's preparing to sell his research to foreign buyers. What kind of research? Targeted bioweapons that can be deployed against specific genetic markers or demographic groups. The children he's been testing on aren't random, they're all being used to refine targeting mechanisms. Raya's voice became urgent. David, they're not just developing weapons. They're developing weapons designed to target specific populations. David looked at Jessica, understanding finally dawning. What genetic markers does Reese have that made her valuable for testing? Jessica's silence confirmed his worst suspicions. His daughter hadn't been chosen randomly. She'd been selected specifically because her genetic profile matched whatever demographic Silas was developing weapons to target. David, Raya continued, I'm sending you coordinates for a tactical team that's been tracking this operation. But you need to know they're planning to move on Silas tonight, with or without your daughter's antidote. David had a choice to make. Trust law enforcement to save Reese, or make a deal with the man who'd poisoned her. Either way, his daughter's life hung in the balance, and time was running out. David raced back into the hospital as alarms began sounding from Reese's room. He found Dr. Harlow and 2 nurses working frantically over his daughter, whose small body was convulsing on the hospital bed. What's happening? David pushed past the medical staff to reach Reese. Seizure activity. The toxin is affecting her neurological system. Dr. Harlow administered medication through Reese's foreline. David, we're running out of time. Her body is shutting down faster than I anticipated. Reese's eyes were rolled back, her muscles rigid with convulsions that made her look like a broken doll. The sight of his daughter in such distress filled David with a cold, focused rage that reminded him of combat situations where the stakes were life or death. How long does she have? At this rate of decline, maybe 2 hours before complete organ failure. Dr. Harlow checked the monitors showing Reese's vital signs. Her kidney function is failing, her heart rhythm is becoming irregular, and we're seeing signs of brain swelling. David's phone buzzed with another text from Silas. Time's up, Mr. Carver. Your daughter needs treatment now. Last chance. Dr. Harlow, if someone had an antidote for this toxin, how quickly would it work? That depends on the mechanism of action. Some antidotes can reverse damage within minutes if administered in time. Others just stop further deterioration. Dr. Harlow looked at David with understanding. David, I can't recommend trusting someone who poisoned your daughter, but I also can't save her with conventional treatment. David's military training kicked in. He assessed the situation like a tactical problem. Reese would die without the antidote. Silas had the antidote, but wanted David in exchange. Law enforcement was planning a raid that might not happen in time to save Reese. The solution was clear, even if it was dangerous. I need to make a call, David said. Stepping into the hallway, he dialed Raya's number while watching Jessica pace nervously in the waiting area. David, please tell me you're not thinking of making a deal with this maniac, Raya said immediately. I'm thinking about saving my daughter's life. What's the status on the federal operation? They're still positioning assets. Best case scenario, they move on Silas's location in 3 hours. Raya paused. David, I know what you're thinking, and it's suicide. These people don't honor deals. Then I'll have to make sure they don't have a choice. David watched Jessica through the waiting room window. I need you to do something for me. What? I'm going to set up a meeting with Silas. When I do, I need you to track my location and make sure the federal team knows exactly where to find me. David's voice became harder. And if something goes wrong, I need you to make sure Silas Deegan doesn't hurt any more children. David, Raya, my daughter is dying. I'm not going to let that happen while I wait for law enforcement to get their act together. David ended the call and returned to Reese's room. His daughter had stopped convulsing, but her breathing was shallow and her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that David recognized from his combat medic experience. Reese was dying, and conventional medicine couldn't save her. I'm going to get the antidote, David told Dr. Harlow. How? By giving Silas what he wants. David kissed Reese's forehead, noting how cold her skin felt. Take care of her until I get back. David, this is insane. You can't trust someone who's been experimenting on children. I'm not trusting him. I'm using him. David checked his phone, finding multiple missed calls from Jessica. But if something goes wrong, make sure everyone knows what really happened here. David left the hospital and found Jessica waiting by her car in the parking lot. I'll call Silas and set up the meeting, Jessica said immediately. But David, he's not going to just hand over the antidote and let you go. I know. That's why you're going to make sure this meeting happens in a location where help can find me quickly. David got into Jessica's car. Call him now. Jessica dialed Silas's number, putting the call on speaker so David could hear both sides of the conversation. Jessica, I was beginning to think you'd chosen your family over our arrangement. Silas's voice was smooth, cultured, with an undertone of menace. Silas, David wants to make a deal. He'll join your operation in exchange for Reese's antidote. Interesting. And what guarantee do I have of Mr. Carver's cooperation once his daughter is treated? You have my word, David said, taking the phone. But I want to see the antidote first. Proof that you can actually save her. Of course. Professional skepticism is understandable. Silas paused. There's a private airfield about 20 miles north of Clearwater. Hangar 12. Can you be there in 1 hour? I'll be there. David ended the call and immediately sent the location details to Raya via text message. David, what if he's lying about the antidote? Jessica asked as they drove toward the airfield. Then I'll kill him and find another way to save our daughter." David's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "But Jessica, you need to understand something. Whatever happens tonight, our marriage is over. What you've done to Reese, to our family, is unforgivable. I know I've lost everything." Jessica wiped tears from her eyes. "But if we can save Reese, maybe someday she'll understand that I never meant for any of this to happen. She'll understand that her mother sold her to a bioweapons dealer for money. She'll understand that you poisoned her multiple times to make sure the experiment provided useful data." David's words were clinical, precise, designed to cut. What she'll never understand is how someone who claimed to love her could do those things. They drove the rest of the way in silence, each lost in thoughts about the confrontation ahead. David was planning tactics, while Jessica grappled with the enormity of her betrayal. Both knew that the next hour would determine whether Reese lived or died, and whether any of them survived the night. As they approached the isolated airfield, David saw lights in Hangar 12 and several vehicles parked nearby. Silas wasn't alone, which complicated the tactical situation but didn't change David's objective. "Whatever happens," David told Jessica as they parked, "remember that you chose this. Every decision that led us here was yours." David surveyed the airfield from the parking area, using his military training to assess the tactical situation. Hangar 12 was a large aircraft maintenance facility with multiple entrances, parked vehicles indicating at least 4 people inside, and clear sight lines in all directions, good for avoiding ambush, bad for approaching unseen. "How many people does Silas usually work with?" David asked Jessica as they sat in her car, observing the location. "I don't know. I've never met him in person before tonight." Jessica's hands trembled on the steering wheel. "All our communication was by phone and email." "What do you know about his operation? How many families has he targeted?" "Based on the emails I saw, at least 15 families over the past year. Maybe more." Jessica stared at the hangar. "David, some of those families just disappeared after their children were exposed. No follow-up communication, no status updates." David understood the implication. Families who became problematic were eliminated entirely, not just the children. If tonight went wrong, Silas would likely kill all 3 of them to protect his operation. That David's phone buzzed with a text from Raya. "Federal team is 30 minutes out. Stall as long as possible." Another message arrived from an unknown number. "Mr. Carver, please come to the hangar. Bring Jessica. We have much to discuss." "He knows we're here," David said, showing Jessica the message. "Time to go." "David, what if this is a trap?" "It is a trap. The question is whether we're walking into it or setting one of our own." David checked his concealed pistol, a habit from his military days that he'd maintained despite civilian life. "Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. And remember, your daughter's life depends on how this goes." They approached the hangar cautiously, David's training allowing him to note potential cover positions and escape routes. The main door was open, revealing bright lights and the sound of conversation inside. "Mr. Carver, welcome." A man in his early 40s emerged from the hangar, extending his hand in greeting. He was well-dressed, professional-looking, with the kind of confident demeanor that suggested he was accustomed to being in control. "Silas Deegan, I assume." David didn't shake the offer hand. "Where's the antidote?" "Direct. I appreciate that in a potential business partner." Silas gestured toward the hangar interior. "Shall we discuss terms inside?" David followed Silas into the hangar, immediately cataloging the people and equipment present. 3 men in tactical gear stood near a small aircraft, while computer equipment and laboratory apparatus occupied several tables. This wasn't just a meeting location, it was a mobile command center. "Impressive setup," David observed. "Mobility is essential in our line of work. Regulatory authorities tend to interfere with innovative research." Silas moved to one of the laboratory tables, where several vials of clear liquid were arranged. "This is what your daughter needs." David examined the vials without touching them. "How do I know that's really an antidote and not more poison?" "Because I have no reason to lie at this point. Your wife has already provided valuable data. Your daughter has served her purpose as a test subject, and you represent a potential asset for future operations. Silas picked up one of the vials. Mr. Carver, I'm offering you a choice. Join our research team as a field medic, and your daughter receives treatment. Refuse, and she dies while we move on to our next targets. What kind of research are you really conducting? Targeted biological weapons development. Highly specific toxins that affect individuals based on genetic markers, ethnic background, or specific demographic characteristics. Silas spoke with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a hobby. The applications are unlimited population control, selective warfare, eliminating undesirable genetic traits from the human gene pool. David felt sick listening to Silas describe mass murder as scientific research. And you need a field medic because human testing requires medical supervision to ensure subjects survive long enough to provide useful data. Too many test subjects die before we can collect complete information about toxin effectiveness. Silas gestured toward his computer equipment. Your military medical training and combat experience make you ideally qualified for field operations. What kind of field operations? We have contracts with several foreign governments interested in population management solutions. Our next assignment involves testing ethnic-specific toxins in refugee camps. Silas showed David photographs on a tablet. Thousands of test subjects, minimal oversight, excellent data collection opportunities. David realized he was looking at plans for genocide disguised as scientific research. Silas wasn't just developing weapons, he was preparing to use them against vulnerable populations who couldn't defend themselves. How many people have you killed with these experiments? Killed is such a crude term. We prefer to think of it as collecting mortality data. Silas smiled coldly. But to answer your question, our research has resulted in approximately 200 deaths so far, including 37 children. David's vision narrowed with rage, but his military training kept him focused on the mission. Get the antidote and survive long enough for help to arrive. What guarantee do I have that you'll actually treat my daughter if I agree to work with you? You have my word as a professional. Silas laughed at his own joke. Mr. Carver, you don't have a choice. Your daughter will die without this antidote, and I'm the only person who has it. Actually, that's not entirely accurate. A new voice came from the hangar entrance. David turned to see Agent Ross, the man who'd approached him at Beau's garage, walking into the hangar with his weapon drawn. Behind him came a team of federal agents in tactical gear. Silas Deegan, you're under arrest for bioterrorism, human trafficking, and multiple counts of murder. Agent Ross moved towards Silas while his team secured the other men in the hangar. Agent Ross, I presume? Your reputation precedes you. Silas remained calm, even with federal agents surrounding him. I assume you're here about our little research project. We're here to shut down your operation and secure the biological weapons you've been developing. Agent Ross gestured toward the laboratory equipment, including the antidotes for the toxins you've been testing on children. David realized that Agent Ross had been legitimate. He was part of a federal task force that had been tracking Silas's operation. The timing of the raid was perfect, but David still needed to ensure Reese received treatment. Agent Ross, my daughter was poisoned with one of his toxins. She needs the antidote immediately. David pointed to the vials on the laboratory table. We'll have medical personnel here within minutes. Agent Ross approached the table, examining the vials carefully. Mr. Deegan, which of these contains the antidote for the insect-delivered toxin? Silas smiled coldly. That information might be available in exchange for certain considerations regarding my future legal situation. Your legal situation is that you're going to spend the rest of your life in federal prison, Agent Ross replied. The only question is whether you'll also face charges for allowing a child to die when you could have saved her. David stepped forward, his combat training taking over. Silas, you have 5 seconds to identify the correct antidote before I make you tell me. Mr. Carver, I appreciate your urgency, but threats won't. David moved with deadly precision, grabbing Silas by the throat and applying pressure that immediately restricted his breathing. For seconds, the blue-capped vial, Silas gasped. Second from the left. Agent Ross secured the vial while David released Silas. Medical team is inbound. Ross reported into his radio. "We need immediate transport to Clearwater Regional Hospital." David felt a moment of relief, knowing that help was finally arriving for Reese. But as he looked around the hangar at the evidence of Silas's operation, the computer files documenting experiments on children, the laboratory equipment designed for developing biological weapons, the photographs of refugee camps marked for future testing, he realized this nightmare was far from over. Agent Ross, how many other operations like this are running? Too many. Deegan's network was just one part of a larger organization that's been conducting illegal human experiments worldwide. Ross gestured toward the computer equipment. "We'll need to analyze all this data to identify other locations and potential victims." David's phone rang. Dr. Harlow's name appeared on the screen. "David, you need to get here immediately. Reese is in cardiac arrest." David raced through the hospital corridors with the antidote vial clutched in his hand, Agent Ross, and a federal medical specialist close behind. The sound of medical alarms grew louder as they approached Reese's room, where Dr. Harlow and his team were performing CPR on David's 10-year-old daughter. "How long has she been down?" the federal medical specialist asked, immediately taking charge of the situation. 3 minutes. "We've been unable to establish a stable rhythm." Dr. Harlow continued chest compressions while nurses prepared additional medications. "Her toxin levels peaked about 20 minutes ago." The specialist examined the antidote vial, reading the label with practiced efficiency. "This is military-grade counteragent, designed for battlefield deployment of similar biotoxins." He prepared a syringe with precise measurements. "If we could get her heart started again, this should neutralize the remaining toxin." David watched helplessly as medical professionals fought to save his daughter's life. Reese looked impossibly small on the hospital bed, her face pale and her body unresponsive to the frantic efforts around her. "David," Agent Ross touched his shoulder. "The medical team knows what they're doing. The antidote has been effective in similar cases." Similar cases? Deegan's operation has been active for 3 years. "We've been tracking his activities and developing countermeasures." Ross showed David a tablet displaying case files. 43 children have been exposed to his experimental biotoxins. Your daughter is the 37th we've been able to treat with antidote. What happened to the others? 6 died before we could intervene. The rest recovered completely with proper treatment. Ross gestured toward Reese. "The antidote works, David. We just need to get her heart started again." Dr. Harlow called out, "We've got rhythm." The cardiac monitor showed a weak but steady heartbeat as Reese's body began responding to the medical intervention. The federal specialist immediately administered the antidote through Reese's foreline. This will take several minutes to take effect, but her vital signs should stabilize once the toxin is neutralized. David moved to his daughter's bedside, taking her small hand in his. "Come on, kiddo. Fight your way back to me." For several minutes, the only sounds in the room were the medical monitors and the quiet conversations of healthcare providers. Then Reese's eyelids fluttered, and she made a small sound that was the most beautiful thing David had ever heard. "Dad." Reese's voice was barely a whisper, but her eyes were open and focused. "I'm right here, sweetheart. You're going to be okay." David squeezed his daughter's hand gently. "The doctors gave you medicine that's going to make you feel much better." "What happened to me?" David looked at Agent Ross, who nodded slightly. "You got sick from some bad bug bites. But the doctors fixed it, and you're going to be fine." "Where's Mom?" The question David had been dreading. Jessica was still at the airfield, being questioned by federal agents about her role in Silas's operation. Whether she would face criminal charges depended on the extent of her involvement and cooperation with the investigation. "Your mom is talking to some people who are trying to help other families that got hurt the same way we did." David chose his words carefully. "She's going to make sure no other kids get sick like you did." Agent Ross stepped forward. "Reese, I'm Agent Ross with the FBI. Your dad helped us catch some very bad people who were hurting children. You're safe now, and we're going to make sure those people can never hurt anyone else." "Did they hurt other kids too?" "Yes, they did. But your dad was very brave and helped us stop them." Ross showed Reese's badge. "Would you like to be an honorary FBI agent for helping us solve this case?" Reese managed a small smile. "Can I have a badge?" I think we can arrange that. Ross winked at David. But first, you need to rest and get better. As Reese's condition stabilized, Dr. Harlow pulled David aside for a private conversation. The antidote is working perfectly. Her toxin levels are dropping rapidly, and all her organ functions are returning to normal. Dr. Harlow checked his tablet. She'll need to stay in the hospital for observation for a few days, but I expect a complete recovery. What about long-term effects? The federal medical specialist says most children who receive timely antidote treatment show no lasting effects from the toxin exposure. Dr. Harlow paused. David, I need to ask you about Jessica's situation. Is she facing criminal charges? David looked through the room's window toward the waiting area, where he could see Jessica sitting with another federal agent. She looked haggard and frightened, occasionally glancing toward Reese's room with obvious anguish. I don't know yet. That depends on what the investigation reveals about her level of involvement. David's voice was flat, emotionless. Agent Ross says she's cooperating fully with their questioning. What will happen to your family? There is no family anymore. David's words were matter of fact, final. Jessica made choices that nearly killed our daughter. That's not something I can forgive or forget. What about Reese? How will you explain her mother's actions? David watched his daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in days. I'll tell her the truth in age-appropriate ways. She deserves to understand what happened and why. Agent Ross returned with updates from the airfield operation. We've arrested Deegan and 3 associates. His computer files contain evidence of operations in 7 states and communications with international buyers for his biotoxins. What happens to him? Federal bioterrorism charges, multiple counts of murder, human trafficking, and conspiracy charges. He's looking at life in prison without possibility of parole. Ross sat down beside David. David, your wife's cooperation has been valuable in understanding how these recruitment operations work. Is she going to prison? That's still being determined. Her attorney is negotiating a plea agreement in exchange for her testimony against Deegan and information about other families he targeted. Ross paused. She's provided critical intelligence that's helping us locate other victims and prevent future attacks. David processed this information without emotion. Jessica's cooperation might reduce her sentence, but couldn't repair the trust she destroyed or undo the danger she'd created for their daughter. I want to see her, David said finally. I want to hear her explanation for what she did. Agent Ross nodded. She's been asking to speak with you. But David, remember that anything she says might be part of her legal strategy. Don't expect complete honesty. David left Reese in Dr. Harlow's care and walked to the waiting area where Jessica sat with her federal escort. When she saw him approaching, Jessica stood immediately, her face showing hope and fear in equal measure. David, thank God Reese is okay. The agent told me the antidote worked. Jessica moved toward him, but David held up a hand to stop her approach. Don't pretend to care about her welfare now. David's voice was ice cold. I want to know why. Why you sold our daughter to a bioweapons dealer. David, it wasn't supposed to be dangerous. Silas told me it was legitimate pharmaceutical research. Jessica's words came out in a rush. He said they were testing new insect repellents and needed to measure effectiveness under real conditions. You knew they were using children as test subjects. I thought it was just data collection, measuring bite patterns and repellent effectiveness. Jessica wiped tears from her eyes. The money he offered was so much, and I thought it would help us get ahead financially. How much money? $25,000 per family, with bonuses for successful data collection. Jessica's voice became smaller. David, I thought I was helping provide for our future. You sold our daughter's safety for $25,000. I didn't know she would be hurt. I swear to you, I thought it was safe. Jessica looked toward Reese's room. When I saw how sick she got, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. A mistake. David's voice rose slightly. You gave her additional doses of toxin to make sure the experiment provided useful data. That wasn't a mistake, that was deliberate child abuse. Jessica flinched as if David had struck her. Silas said the additional doses were just to ensure accurate results. He said they were harmless supplements. Did you believe that? Jessica was quiet for a long moment. I wanted to believe it. The money was so much more than we'd ever had, and I thought it would solve our financial problems. So you were willing to risk our daughter's life for money? Yes. The admission was barely audible. David, I know what I did was unforgivable. I know I've destroyed our family. But please, for Reese's sake, don't let this destroy her relationship with both parents. David looked at his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt nothing but contempt. Reese will know the truth about what you did. She'll make her own decisions about whether to have a relationship with you. What about us? Is there any way? There is no us. David's words were final, absolute. Our marriage ended the moment you decided our daughter's life was worth $25,000. David turned and walked back toward Reese's room, leaving Jessica crying in the waiting area. He had no sympathy for her tears or her regrets. The woman he'd married wouldn't have endangered their child for any amount of money. The person sitting in that waiting area was a stranger who happened to share his last name. 3 days later, David sat beside Reese's hospital bed as she colored in a book Agent Ross had brought her. His daughter's recovery had been remarkable. The antidote had completely neutralized the toxin, and her natural resilience was helping her bounce back quickly from the ordeal. "Dad, when can we go home?" Reese asked, not looking up from her coloring. "Dr. Harlow says maybe tomorrow, if your blood tests continue to improve." David watched his daughter work on a picture of a butterfly. "Are you excited about going home?" "Kind of, but home feels different now." Reese set down her crayon and looked at her father with serious eyes. "Is Mom coming home with us?" David had been preparing for this conversation since the night of the arrests. "No, sweetheart. Your mom is going to be living somewhere else for a while. Because of what she did to me." The directness of the question surprised David. "What do you understand about what happened?" "I know Mom made a deal with bad people who wanted to hurt kids. And I know she gave me poison to make me sick so the bad people could see what it did." Reese's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing a school project. "Agent Ross explained it to me. How do you feel about that?" Reese considered the question carefully. "Sad, and angry, and confused." She picked up her crayon again. "I don't understand why Mom would hurt me for money. I don't understand it either, kiddo. Sometimes adults make very bad choices for reasons that don't make sense." David chose his words carefully. "But what I want you to know is that what happened wasn't your fault, and you're safe now." "Will Mom go to jail?" "I don't know yet. She's helping the police catch other bad people, so maybe her punishment will be different." David pulled his chair closer to Reese's bed. "But whatever happens to your mom, you and I are going to be okay together. Just you and me. Just you and me. Is that okay with you?" Reese nodded solemnly. "I like it when it's just us. You pay attention to what I say, and you don't make me feel scared." The observation broke David's heart. "Did your mom make you feel scared?" "Sometimes, especially the last few months. She was always on her phone, and she got upset when I asked questions about her work." Reese returned to her coloring, and she started looking at me funny, like she was thinking about something that made her sad. David realized that Reese had been aware of Jessica's change in behavior long before the camping trip. His daughter had sensed something was wrong, but hadn't been able to articulate her concerns. "Reese, I want you to know that you can always talk to me about anything. If something doesn't feel right, or if someone makes you uncomfortable, you can tell me." David took his daughter's hand. "I will always listen to you, and I will always protect you." "I know, Dad. That's why I wasn't really scared when I got sick. I knew you would fix it." Reese squeezed his hand. "You always take care of me." Dr. Harlow appeared in the doorway with Reese's latest test results. "Good news, young lady. Your blood work looks perfect. I think you can go home tomorrow morning." "Really?" Reese's face lit up with excitement. "Can we have pancakes for breakfast at home?" "We can have whatever you want for breakfast," David promised. Agent Ross arrived shortly after Dr. Harlow left, carrying a small box and wearing a smile. "Special delivery for Honorary Agent Reese Carver," Ross announced, presenting the box with ceremonial formality. Reese opened the box to find an official FBI Junior Agent badge and certificate. "This is so cool. Can I show it to my class when I go back to school?" "Absolutely. You earn it by being brave and helping us catch some very dangerous criminals." Ross sat down beside Reese's bed. "David, I have some updates about the case that I thought you'd want to hear." "Good news or bad news?" "Mostly good. Deegan's operation has been completely shut down. We've rescued 6 other children who are being held for extended observation, and we've identified the locations of 3 other testing facilities. Ross pulled out a tablet. Your wife's cooperation has been instrumental in mapping the entire network. What's her legal situation? She'll likely face reduced charges in exchange for her continued cooperation. Probably 5 to 7 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole after 3 years if she continues to provide valuable intelligence. Ross glanced at Reese, who was focused on her new badge. The prosecutor is recommending a minimum sentence due to her cooperation and the fact that she was recruited through manipulation rather than seeking out criminal activity. David nodded, feeling no satisfaction in Jessica's fate. What about the other families? The ones who were targeted before us? We're still locating them. Some families were relocated by witness protection after their children recovered. Others, Ross paused. 14 families didn't report their children's symptoms, and by the time we found them, it was too late. How many children died? 8. Their families thought they were dealing with severe allergic reactions or unusual illnesses. They didn't seek specialized treatment in time. Ross's expression was grave. Your decision to get Reese to Dr. Harlow immediately probably saved her life. David thought about those other families, other parents who had trusted their spouses and lost their children as a result. The scope of Silas's evil was staggering, not just the children he'd killed directly, but the families he destroyed through manipulation and betrayal. Is it over? Are there other operations like this still running? We're tracking several leads, but Deegan's network was the largest we've identified. His computer files have given us intelligence about international buyers and similar operations in other countries. Ross stood to leave. David, you should know that your actions probably prevented dozens of other children from being harmed. The information you provided and the risks you took made it possible to shut this down. After Ross left, David sat quietly with Reese as she examined her new badge and certificate. His daughter seemed to have processed the trauma of her experience with remarkable resilience. But David knew that the full psychological impact might not emerge for months or years. Dad, Reese looked up from her badge. Are you sad about Mom? The question caught David off guard. What do you mean? You look sad when people talk about her. Are you sad that she's going away? David considered how to answer honestly without burdening his daughter with his own emotional complexity. I'm sad about what she did, and I'm sad that our family is different now. But I'm not sad that you're safe. Do you still love her? I love the person I thought she was. But that person wasn't real. David stroked Reese's hair. The most important thing is that I love you, and nothing will ever change that. Good, because I need you to be my dad always. Reese leaned against David's shoulder. Can we get a dog when we go home? I think a dog would make our house feel more like a family again. David smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in days. Yeah, kiddo. I think a dog sounds like a great idea. 6 months later, David stood on the shore of a different lake with Reese, watching her examine water samples with the field microscope he'd bought for her 11th birthday. Their new dog, Scout, splashed happily into shallow water, chasing sticks and barking at fish. Dad, look at this. Reese called excitedly, adjusting her microscope focus. I think I found a new species of water beetle. David walked over to examine his daughter's discovery, noting how she'd grown more confident and curious in the months since their ordeal. The trauma of her poisoning had faded, but had also strengthened her interest in science and her determination to understand the natural world around her. That's definitely unusual, David agreed, studying the beetle through the microscope. Want to document it in your field journal? Already did. Reese showed him detailed notes and sketches she'd made of the specimen. I'm going to send photos to Dr. Martinez at the university. She said she'd help me identify anything really unusual. Dr. Elena Martinez was an entomologist who had contacted David after reading about their case in scientific journals. She'd become an informal mentor to Reese, encouraging her interest in legitimate scientific research and helping her understand the difference between ethical science and the horrors they'd experienced. David's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Ross. Deegan's sentencing today. Thought you'd want to know the outcome. David called Ross immediately, stepping away from Reese so she couldn't overhear the conversation. Life in prison without possibility of parole, Ross reported. Federal judge threw the book at him. Bioterrorism, murder, conspiracy, human trafficking. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell again. What about his associates? 25 to life for the main conspirators. Shorter sentences for the lower-level operatives who cooperated with our investigation. Ross paused. David, we've now identified 47 families that were targeted by his network. Your case was the one that broke it open. How are the other victims doing? Mixed results. Most of the children who received prompt treatment recovered completely. We lost 11 total, and 3 have permanent disabilities from delayed treatment. Ross's voice became more personal. David, without your actions that night, we might never have caught Deegan. He was planning to expand internationally. David looked at Reese, who was carefully collecting water samples for later analysis. His daughter had transformed her traumatic experience into motivation for understanding the natural world, the opposite of what Silas Deegan had intended. What about Jessica? She was sentenced to 4 years federal prison, parole eligible after 2 years. She continues to cooperate with ongoing investigations into related networks. Ross hesitated. David, she's been asking about contacting Reese, writing letters or phone calls. What did you tell her? That any contact would need to go through you first, and that Reese's welfare takes priority over Jessica's desires for communication. Ross's tone made his opinion clear. Personally, I think the kid is better off without that influence in her life. David agreed, but he also knew that someday Reese might want to understand her mother's perspective. When that time came, he would support his daughter's decision while making sure she was emotionally prepared for the conversation. Thanks for the update, Ross. I appreciate everything you've done for us. Thank you, David. Your courage saved a lot of lives. David ended the call and returned to Reese, who was now teaching Scout to retrieve specific types of sticks from the water. Everything okay, Dad? Reese asked, noting his serious expression. Just talking to Agent Ross about the bad people we helped catch. They're all going to prison for a very long time. David sat beside his daughter on their camping blanket. They can't hurt any more children. Good. I hope they learn that hurting kids is wrong. Reese threw a stick for Scout. Dad, do you think Mom learned that what she did was wrong? The question surprised David. Reese rarely mentioned Jessica anymore, having seemed to accept her mother's absence as a permanent change. What makes you ask about that? I've been thinking about her lately, wondering if she's sorry about what she did. Reese watched Scout retrieve the stick. Do you think she misses me? David chose his words carefully. I think she misses you very much, and I think she regrets what she did. But missing you and being sorry doesn't undo the choice she made. Would you let me talk to her if I wanted to? If you really wanted to, and if you were ready for it, then yes. But only when you're sure you want to, not because anyone else thinks you should. David put his arm around Reese. Why? Are you thinking about talking to her? Maybe someday. Not now, but maybe when I'm older and can understand better. Reese leaned against her father. Right now, I like our life the way it is. David felt a surge of pride at his daughter's emotional maturity. She was processing her trauma at her own pace, making decisions based on her own needs rather than external pressure. I like our life too, kiddo. Just you, me, and Scout. And our work. Reese added, gesturing toward her scientific equipment point 6 months earlier. David had accepted a consulting position with a bioethics watchdog organization that monitored illegal medical research. The work allowed him to travel occasionally while maintaining a base in Clearwater, and his military medical background made him valuable for investigating potential bioweapons activities. More importantly, the work gave meaning to their traumatic experience. Every illegal research operation they helped shut down prevented other families from enduring what they'd survived. Speaking of our work, David said, I got a call yesterday about a situation in Colorado. Families reporting unusual illnesses after camping trips in remote areas. Do you think it's another operation like what happened to us? Maybe. That's what we need to find out. David showed Reese the preliminary report on his tablet. Want to help me analyze the data when we get home? Absolutely. Reese's eyes lit up with the same excitement she'd shown for bug collecting. Can we bring Scout if we have to travel for the investigation? We'll see. But Reese, you understand that this work can be dangerous sometimes, right? I know. But Dad, if we don't help stop these people, they'll keep hurting kids. Reese's voice carried a determination that reminded David of her mother's better qualities, but without the selfishness that had ultimately corrupted Jessica's judgment. David felt a complex mix of pride and protectiveness. His daughter had emerged from their ordeal not as a victim, but as someone committed to preventing others from suffering the same fate. She'd found purpose in their pain, transforming trauma into motivation for justice. You're right, and that's exactly why we do this work. David stood and began packing their scientific equipment. But we do it smart, and we do it safe. No unnecessary risks, no heroic gestures. Just careful investigation and working with the right authorities, Reese recited, having heard this lecture many times. Exactly, because the most important thing is that we both stay safe so we can keep helping other families. David loaded their gear into the car while Scout shook water from his fur. Ready to head home? Ready, Dad. As they drove back toward Clearwater, David reflected on how much their lives had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a high school biology teacher married to a woman he thought he knew, living a comfortable but unremarkable life. Now he was a single father working to prevent bioterrorism, raising a daughter who'd survived biological warfare and emerged stronger for it. The betrayal still hurt, would probably always hurt, but David had found peace in his new purpose. Every investigation, every illegal operation they helped shut down, honored the memory of the children who hadn't survived Silas Deegan's experiments. Dad, Reese's voice interrupted his thoughts. Do you ever wonder what our life would be like if Mom hadn't done what she did? Sometimes. Do you? Yeah, but I think maybe this is better. Reese scratched Scout behind the ears. I like helping people, and I like that we understand how important it is to pay attention to details and trust our instincts. What do you mean? You always taught me to observe things carefully. But now I really understand why that matters. Reese looked out the window at the passing forest. If we hadn't noticed that something was wrong with Mom's behavior, if we hadn't trusted our instincts about the camping trip, other kids might have died. David realized his daughter had learned lessons from their experience that would serve her well throughout her life. She understood the importance of trusting her instincts, questioning situations that seemed wrong, and taking action to protect vulnerable people. You're pretty wise for an 11-year-old, you know that. I learned from my dad. Reese grinned at him. Plus, surviving biological warfare kind of gives you perspective on what's really important. 2 weeks later, David and Reese sat around a campfire at a legitimate, well-regulated campground near Mount Hood. Their investigation into the Colorado incidents had revealed another illegal testing operation, smaller than Deegan's network, but following similar patterns. Working with federal authorities, they provided intelligence that led to arrests and the rescue of 3 families before any children were seriously harmed. This is what camping should be like, Reese observed, roasting a marshmallow over the controlled fire. Safe location, proper permits, no mysterious insects. And no one trying to use us as test subjects, David added, checking their campsite perimeter from habit. Even in legitimate camping situations, his military training kept him alert to potential threats. Dad, do you think we'll ever stop being careful about stuff like this? David considered the question as he watched Scout chase fireflies in the gathering darkness. I don't think we should stop being careful. What happened to us taught us that danger can come from unexpected places, even from people we trust. But how do we know it won't happen again? The question David had been expecting. He looked at his daughter, seeing both the innocence she'd retained and the wisdom she'd gained through their ordeal. Because I trust my instincts now, and I never let my guard down again. David met Reese's eyes across the fire. I know what warning signs to look for, and I know that protecting you is my most important job. What if someone tries to trick us again? Then we'll be ready for them. We know how these operations work. We have contacts in law enforcement, and most importantly, we communicate with each other about anything that seems wrong. David added another log to the fire. No more secrets. No more assuming that everything is fine just because someone says it is. Reese nodded solemnly. And we keep helping other families so they don't have to go through what we did. Exactly. We turn our experience into protection for others. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down and listening to the normal sounds of these safe forest owls calling, wind in the trees, other campers settling down for the night. These were the sounds David had missed during their nightmare camping trip, when every noise had seemed threatening and every shadow could hide danger. Dad, Reese yawned as the fire burned low. I'm glad it's just us. I like our team. Me too, kiddo. We make a pretty good team. As David tucked Reese into her sleeping bag in their tent, he felt a sense of completion that had been missing from his life for months. They'd survived betrayal, biological warfare, and the destruction of their family unit. But they'd emerged stronger, more purpose-driven, and committed to protecting others from similar fates. Jessica had tried to destroy their family for money, but she'd inadvertently created something better, a father and daughter, united by shared purpose and unbreakable trust. David would never forgive his ex-wife for what she'd done, but he could acknowledge that her betrayal had ultimately led them to a life of greater meaning. Scouts settled down between their sleeping bags, alert to any unusual sounds, but relaxed in the secure environment David had carefully chosen. Even their dog understood the difference between genuine safety and mere appearance of safety. "Good night, Dad," Reese whispered in the darkness. "Good night, sweetheart. Sweet dreams." David lay awake for a while longer, listening to his daughter's peaceful breathing and Scout's contented sighs. For the first time in months, he felt truly at peace. They were safe, they were together, and they were making a difference in the world. The nightmare was over. Their new life had begun.